And joining us now, Pentagon Press Secretary, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. Good to have you this hour, sir.
Admiral, thank you so much for being with us. So what is the current state? We read the newspapers. We see where they say this war's going. Obviously, though, we lean in a little bit more when we get Pentagon reports on what the Pentagon's assessment of the fighting is. What's it look like right now in Ukraine?
I'd say kind of break it up into three parts, Joe. In the north, the Russians are clearly stalled, and what we're seeing them do is really dig in and make defensive positions, particularly around Kyiv. And as you rightly reported, the Ukrainians are fighting back. They're actually taking territory back in the north. In the east, the Russians seem to be prioritizing the Donbass area. They're putting more resources in there. They're going on more offensive operations there. We think they're trying to cut the Ukrainian forces off in the east so that they can't come to the aid of their colleagues more to the west. And then in the south, the Russians also continue to be stalled now. There's been a bit of a back and forth down south. Originally, the Russians were really making most of their progress down there into Kherson and on Mykolaiv, moving on Mariupol. But now they are stalled again in the south, and the Ukrainians are again taking back territory, particularly around Kherson, that city which was in Russian hands. Now we view as being contested. The Ukrainians are actually trying to claw it back.
President Zelensky has said he desperately needs planes, desperately needs tanks, desperately needs anti-missile systems, anti-ship systems. Other Ukrainians suggesting that Mariupol may fall within the next 5 to 7 days if NATO countries don't come in with more support. Is there any possibility of that we could save Mariupol?
I'll tell you what, the support, Joe, is going, and it's going very fast. In fact, of the $800 million that the president just signed out not long ago, we've already delivered 4 shipments on that tranche alone, and more coming in. In fact, another one arrived today. And it's not just the United States, Joe. Other nations are also contributing security assistance, materials, weapons systems, missiles, and all that stuff is flowing in there. When we were in Europe just last week, Secretary Austin got a chance to meet with his counterpart, so would Secretary Blinken. They talked about additional aid that they want, more material, more systems, and we're working really hard to get that to them as fast as we can. Now, Mariupol is under siege. You're absolutely right. It has been under siege now for over a week, and the Ukrainians keep fighting back very, very hard. We're doing the best we can to get them the kinds of systems that they need in that fight.
So, Admiral, just to sort of confirm what you're saying about the machinery is flowing in there, is exactly what they need to try and push back what seems to be a desperate effort to save Mariupol actually happening? I mean, there are some high-level officials telling us that, the Poles have certain equipment, but they're waiting for the U.S. to give word. Is there any coordination problem with this?
No. Actually, it's a great question, Mika. We are helping coordinate the delivery of weapons and systems that other nations are providing, which also, these are lethal systems. These are missiles, anti-tank missiles, surface-to-air missiles that aren't ours, but we're helping coordinate their delivery into Ukraine. And that stuff is getting in every single day. And we have talked to the Ukrainians, again, just last week about what their needs are, and we're doing the best we can to fill those needs. We're trying to focus, at least from the United States perspective, we're trying to focus on the kinds of things that they use the most effectively and that they know how to use, that don't require any additional training. They can just put it right in the field and use them, like Stinger missiles and Javelin anti-tank missiles, small arms and ammunition, those kinds of things. And they are using those very, very effectively.
What about the coordination in the next few days?
We expect it'll continue. I mean, we are, again, working very hard with other nations to help facilitate the movement on the ground of the things that they're shipping in close by to Ukraine. And we're being very careful about how we're moving those things in so that they can get to the hands of the Ukrainians as quickly as possible. But we have a coordination center set up in Europe that we're in Poland that we're working to try to help coordinate those deliveries.
Admiral, good morning. A couple of competing theories out there, as you know, about the strategy now for the Russian military, one being that Vladimir Putin digs in despite the fact that he's been stymied by the Ukrainian military and civilians with the help of American arms. Others are that he pulls back, focuses on the east, and perhaps launches missile strikes from Russia into Ukrainian cities. Do you have a sense of where his mind is right now, or at least where the strategy of the Russian military may be?
It's very difficult, Willie, to know specifically what Mr. Putin's going to do on a day-to-day basis. All I can do is tell you what we're seeing happen. And what we're seeing is that they are taking defensive positions in the north. They don't appear to be willing or able to move on Kyiv anymore. They're just kind of digging in around the city. And as I said, the Ukrainians are fighting back. What we are seeing, Willie, is a prioritization. And heck, they actually publicly admitted this. But we saw it a few days ago. They were starting to prioritize the Donbass area, that eastern part of Ukraine, which they have been fighting now over for 8 years. Now, it's hard to know, Willie, whether that's going to be the end all. That's going to be the sum total of what he wants, is to just carve out the East? Or is he using that as a negotiating tactic? Can he make progress in the East and then sit down at the table with some sort of leverage? We don't know. It's not really clear. What is clear is that he really blundered in this whole war effort, and the initial efforts to go after Kyiv clearly have failed.
Admiral, could you talk a bit more about the supply line that you were just referencing of equipment into Ukraine?
Sure.
Ukraine, obviously a country at war. The degree of difficulty and danger in moving this equipment along the line.
We have to be very careful, Mike, as you might imagine. So a lot of these things are being flown in nearby to coordination centers, like I was talking about with Mika. And then they are trucked into Ukraine, and they are trucked in on various different routes. And those routes vary from day to day, as you might expect. We want to be very careful here to protect the operational security of this movement. It is met by Ukrainian drivers. They take it into the country. They deliver it to depots and to sites where the Ukrainian armed forces can then pull on that material to go and use on the battlefield. It is a very, very dynamic process, Mike. You might imagine it's constantly varying. We're constantly looking at it. We want to protect those flows as much as we can. Now, Mike, we have not seen the Russians try to strike these routes yet. They have their hands full just staying on the defense in the north and trying to make some progress in the east, but we're constantly watching for that.
So, Admiral, we have another retired admiral with us who has a question for you. Retired four-star Navy admiral and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander James Stavridis. Admiral, you can take it to the admiral.
Yeah, this is historic. 2 admirals, and so far no one has called either one of us general, which is what happens way too much. I know my good friend John Kirby has experienced that as well. John, great to see you. My question would be twofold. One is, can you just give us a sense from the Pentagon's viewpoint, why are the Russians failing? What are the failure points here? Thinking perhaps there's exploitable information there over time. And secondly, Admiral, just a quick comment on potential use of a chemical weapon. Are we still seeing kind of flickers of that? Thank you.
Yes, sir. It's good to see you again. Listen, on the chemical biological weapons, what I would tell you is we haven't seen any indications that they plan to imminently use those kinds of systems, and we haven't seen any indications that those kinds of systems are actually in Ukraine yet. But it's something, as you well know, sir, that we're watching very, very closely every day, because that really would escalate the level of violence in Ukraine to a degree where the president has made clear that the international community would have to respond. On your first question, boy, there's a lot there. I would tell you a couple of things. First of all, we think they overestimated their own ability to maneuver and to take and hold ground. They underestimated the Ukrainians' ability and willingness to fight for their country. And quite frankly, and you know this because you were over there, sir, they underestimated the degree to which the Ukrainians have been adequately and very, very professionally trained over the last 8 years to use these systems in the field. That's getting lost a lot in the discussion. I think also they have had significant logistics and sustainment problems. They are still having fuel problems. They're having trouble feeding their troops. They did not plan for a very dynamic way of sustaining their efforts on the ground. Number 5 here is that they aren't operating jointly. They don't coordinate between air and ground and maritime the way we do in the United States military. And so we're picking up lots of tension between commanders because they're not talking to one another. They're not coordinating their operations. And then lastly, if I may, and this is a long list, but it's just the morale. It's a largely conscript force. They were not properly prepared and trained for this operation, and many of them were lied to, didn't even know that they were going to invade Ukraine, and so they're having real leadership and morale, unit cohesion problems on the ground every single day.
Admiral, and I guess I should specify Admiral Kirby. It's Jonathan Lemire. Two quick ones for you here. Can you give us a sense just in terms of the manpower that Russia has right now? Have we seen any pullback of any of their forces out of Ukraine? And also give us an update in terms of the battle for the skies, where it seems like there's still no air superiority established one way or the other. Is that right?
That's correct. We still assess that the airspace over Ukraine is contested. The Russians have not achieved air superiority. And this is interesting because they actually have surface-to-air missile coverage largely from systems that are based in Russia and in Belarus that basically blanket the whole country. But the Ukrainians have been so nimble and so creative with the way they use the air defense systems that they have available to them. They have been able to contest the skies. As for the numbers, again, well north of 150,000 troops contributed to this effort already and are in Ukraine. We have not seen them withdraw outside Ukraine. Now, we have seen some early indications that the Russians are trying to reinforce and make up for some of their losses by bringing troops, for instance, that they have in Georgia and bringing them into the fight. So we're watching that closely, too. But it's very apparent to us that the Russians know that that manpower is going to be a factor for them. They are losing soldiers every single day. And as I said to Admiral Stavridis, they're still having unit cohesion problems as well that are amplifying the problems they're having on the ground.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.